First, before we talk about a lot of the details within the deal, you gotta note that this is the biggest gaming acquisition deal to ever happen by tens of billions of dollars. And so far, it looks like the deal is supposedly going to happen at around 68.7 billion. And it's a little bit sad because they could have just rounded up to 69 and this deal would have pumped their stock a lot more. In fact, when the deal was announced, Microsoft stock actually went down 2%. Meanwhile, Activision stock went up over 30%. And the reason for this is because they are actually technically buying up at that $69 billion valuation. They're buying up Activision Blizzard at around $95 per share. And realistically speaking, that's pretty freaking good for any investor that bought on this most recent dip. And before we had the 100, 105 spike just a little less than a year ago. And if you're unfamiliar with what happened and why this stock crashed so much, all the way down to $60 per share, and that is because of some of the things that were going on internally within the company itself. A lot of that has to do with the misconduct that was happening at the company and some of the employees raising some alarm bells at what's happening internally, to the point where the CEO almost had to leave the company. And whether he should have or not is a different story that we'll talk about a little bit later, but other executives at Activision did end up leaving the company, and that is probably for good reason. Now, let's talk about the actual deal itself. The first question we should be asking is this an actual fair valuation for the stock itself? And personally, I think so. I mean, technically, they're paying above what the price of the stock was initially at the time of the announcement, which was around $68 per share, and now it's sitting well above $80 per share. And they're buying it, like I said before, at $95 per share. So in all technicality, Microsoft is paying a premium for what this stock is technically worth at current market price. But it is a little bit different from the all-time highs of where this stock has been at, which is $104 and some change. And of course, there is an investigation going on already, just like there is with almost any acquisition or buyout or merger. But in my personal belief, I think that that will probably fall just by the wayside because there are more pressing concerns with this acquisition. For example, if you don't see the red flags already, let me go into it a little bit further. The first thing that we got to remember is that this is one of the biggest tech giants in the world, buying up one of the biggest gaming companies in the world in a deal valued at billions, tens of billions, in fact, bigger than the previous biggest purchase of a gaming company. I mean, if you want to get into it, even Sony, one of the biggest gaming companies in the world, actually second in line next to Tencent, had only put away about $13 billion to spend over the next 2 years when it comes to expanding and growing their gaming sector. Meanwhile, Microsoft over here sitting with over $130 billion in cash, figuring out ways to spend it all, from trying to buy TikTok to now actually officially putting in an offer to buy Activision Blizzard at $69 billion might seem a little bit absurd, especially if you know that the last big acquisition, the biggest acquisition that has happened, was around $11 billion, which happened when Take-Two Interactive decided to buy Zynga, which was just a gaming company that launched on Facebook initially, and now is being acquired for $11 billion, which at the time seemed absolutely insane. But when comparing to this deal, an all-cash offer from Microsoft to buy Activision Blizzard for $69 billion is seemingly just a drop in the bucket when all things considered. The next big question is, with all those allegations that we talked about earlier, and we'll talk about them a little bit more, how will the leadership roles adjust at Activision and at Microsoft, and if they will adjust? And also, what are regulators going to say about this whole acquisition, especially when we look at the possibility for monopolization of this said industry? And I think all of that will depend on how Microsoft chooses to play this. And as far as the workplace discrimination goes, most of that seemingly, at least on paper, has been addressed by an email to Xbox employees, aka the CEO of Microsoft, Phil Spencer. And I'm going to look at my phone here for an exact quote. He wrote in November that he was disturbed and deeply troubled by the horrific events and actions at Activision. And more recently, he appeared alongside Bobby Kotick, which is the current CEO of Activision, and looked at the plan that they have in place when it comes to culture, adding that the company culture was always a work in progress. And they are very supportive of the progress that he and the team are making. Now, of course, with all this said, this could just be for the publicity, and so that way Microsoft stock doesn't tank, and also to protect Activision Blizzard investors and people suing if the stock price went down, if they all of a sudden just said, you know what, we're completely restructuring. They kind of want to do that slowly. I mean, this deal could take 12 to 18 months to do. Now, of course, we don't know whether or not they plan to keep Kotick around or if it's a good idea in general. I think a lot of people, especially employees, were concerned about this whole debacle back in September and October of last year, and maybe this will just be a tiny blip on the radar as far as what might come next, which is what we're going to talk about. But I personally believe that restructuring a company during an acquisition is a must, but the best way to do it is slowly after the acquisition has taken place. Again, this is just my personal belief and what I've seen in the startup world, even during rebrandings. It's very, very tough to do it during, but actually very, very doable if you do it after and if you introduce it slowly. People don't like change that's abrupt. People like change that's slow. But the current CEO of Activision did say something along the lines of, post-close, I will be available as needed to ensure that we have the very best integration, which could just be a way of saying, I would love to stay, but I might just be operating as like a co-chairman or a partner as things move forward. And again, it will be interesting to see, but I don't expect any further news as far as that goes, at least not for the next 12 to 18 months. Some of the things to note, though, is the fact that after this acquisition takes place, Microsoft will become the third biggest gaming company when it comes to revenue. And of course, that will be behind the companies Tencent and Sony. And the fact that this is all happening and such a big deal is taking place, that could grab the attention of regulators, especially the fact that this is what we've already explained on the channel before, which is essentially the arms race for exclusive content, aka the console wars. And whoever wins the console wars, because there will likely be one main winner, that company will likely end up owning a big chunk of the gaming metaverse that we've all kind of been thinking and talking about in the last 6 to 12 months. Now, of course, when reporters were actually talking to Mr. Spencer, in an article, they mentioned that their goal at Microsoft is to reach as many players as possible. Now, what that means is very convoluted, and we'll have to see how regulators react to what their actions are versus what they're just saying right now, because obviously it is in Microsoft's best interest to keep all the revenues for themselves and lock up all these games like Call of Duty, Overwatch, and a bunch of other titles that I'll show on the screen here. Now, of course, they'll likely want to avoid regulators as much as possible, so they might start to come up with solutions like maybe we'll keep Activision as a second department and we'll still make a bunch of money selling it to Sony or Stadia or essentially any other console that comes around, but maybe a way to drive more revenue back to themselves is rather than to make it exclusive for Xbox, maybe you'll have exclusive initial access to the games coming out on Xbox, maybe like a beta for a month or two as the games are being released, and then you'll see it on other consoles. Even if that happens, could still raise some stink for regulators and Microsoft down the road. And honestly, I think that this deal could put Xbox and Microsoft on the map when it comes to not just console wars, but even the metaverse as well. And in my last video where I talked about Sony, I made sure to mention how they were sort of kind of winning the console wars and how they were putting so much money behind gaming and literally investing $13 billion over the course of 2.5 years. And even personally, and some of my friends have switched over to PlayStation as their favorite consoles, even though some of us used Xbox for 5 or 10 years. But with this deal, and depending on how it all plays out, this could mean that a lot of users, we're talking about millions and millions of people, not just owning one console or maybe two because of Nintendo, right? But maybe owning multiple consoles and having to in order to play their favorite games moving forward. And my biggest worry is how regulators will react to that sort of thing, especially with the size that Microsoft is already today. But there you have everything that you need to know about the acquisition deal of Activision Blizzard and Microsoft paying $69 billion cash for this company. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to smash the like button and also subscribe. I noticed that around 80% of the viewers that watch this channel are not subscribed. Even though you might think you're subscribed and you like these videos, make sure to scroll down there and turn the red button from red to gray. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.